I want to surface a quote that I really love of yours, that aging is a privilege.
In society, women are, it's the Barbie monologue, right? It's like, be healthy, but really be thin. Never get old. We often will disregard women once they reach a certain age. I think that aging is such a privilege. To get wrinkles is such a privilege. It's such a privilege to wake up every day.
I want to get into the territory of psychology now. First of all, what is self-love to you? And how does it show up in your life?
I think for me, self-love is making sure that I am doing what I'm going to say that I'm going to do for myself. You mentioned self-trust. Part of the way that you increase your self-trust is by sticking to the behavioral goals and not just focusing on the outcome. So you might say, I want to lose 10 pounds. That's the outcome. The stuff that you want to be thinking about is the behaviors that lead to the outcome. So I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week, and you effing keep your promise to yourself. Like, you get your ass to the gym, come hell or high water, 3 times a week. And that's actually how you develop self-trust.
This is the Roxanne Show. Get ready. It's time to rise. Stephanie, our listeners just tuning in right now, what do you believe our talk that we're about to have, and I'm so excited to have with you, can impact the way they feel in their bodies and really how they show up in their lives?
Well, I hope that we're going to talk about how we can show up for ourselves first. I think that this is for the women and the men who love them. I think women are typically incredibly nurturing. We have a default, we're raised to be caregivers, which is wonderful. That's how we raise children, and that's how communities are built, because we're all giving to each other. And I think it's important for women to also put themselves first. It's the put on the mask before anybody else. We have to also take care of ourselves so that we can serve our communities and the people that we love. So I think that so often the nurturing and the caregiving often can come first. There's so many to-dos. There's so many people that we're serving, and we forget to serve ourselves. So I hope that we're going to talk about how we can prioritize our own health and well-being, even just for the fact that we are important enough to focus on. Yes. And only then, if there's someone else that you want, if you want to be the best mother, the best wife, the best, friend, the best sister, whatever, that's also an important pursuit as well. But I think at the primary objective, I think for women in health and the pursuit of health is so that we can become more of who we already are, and to prioritize our own care, because we're just inherent default. We're worth it. We're worth investing in.
Yes. I love that message so much. We resonate on so many levels. We're very much aligned in so many ways. I want to ask you that made me think of this question. At what point in your life did that concept, that idea, that approach, making sure that you're taking care of yourself first, while also, being a mother and a wife and, a caretaker, a doctor, literally supporting people to feel their best. When did this become really important to you, such that it really became your default setting? I
actually think, when I was pregnant, I think that I was thinking a lot about the health of the baby. That's what we do when we're pregnant. We're like, I gotta, this is week this, the fingernails are growing this week. And what I really was thinking about is, how can I be the healthiest version of myself? Because I know what's ahead, right? Labor and delivery, which everyone focuses on. And then nobody actually talks to you about the actual parenting part that happens after labor and delivery, which is like the 18-year commitment. Like we give birth for, most of us like 24 hours, maybe 48, 72 on the long end. But then there's like an 18-year commitment at least,
Yeah.
And if you're, I sort of joke and say, if you're, Mediterranean or, Asian descent, it's like, the kids live at home until they get married. So like 30, 40, 30 or 40
true.
years old, right?
So true.
So I really wanted to, when I was pregnant with my first son, I really started thinking about my own health. And because I was pregnant, because I knew that I was going to be a mother, and I'll say that was when there was no exceptions. So prior to that, went through chiropractic school, became a doctor, as you mentioned, paid my way through chiropractic school by teaching fitness classes and, was doing all of that stuff. But anybody who's been through any professional schooling knows that you become, and ironically, I was in a healthcare field, like you become the most unhealthiest version of yourself in order to be sitting for 8 hours through classes and then however many hours studying and then board exams is a whole other animal. So I was like healthy-ish, it really became very important for me when I was starting a family.
Yeah, that's amazing. That makes perfect sense, actually. And I so agree with you. I think working with so many women, I witness how there's a larger tendency to put themselves last instead of understanding how it's actually the highest service to everybody in their lives, people in their immediate circle, family, partners, but also just like to the world, right? You will never be the greatest contributor that you could be from a depleted, disconnected, fragmented self, right? So I love that message so much. I want to ask you, on your website, there's this really rad quote. You said, "I believe in straight talk, daily greens, womb power, science, making fuck you money." You say F you money, but I got to roxify it here. "A sparkly clean kitchen, growing my own food, cutting out the meh, and striving for excellence in every aspect of my life." This is so awesome. What would you add to this list now and why?
Ooh, I would probably, so growing my own food. Certainly I have plans this year to sort of totally redo my backyard. It's going to be all vegetables.
Nice.
If I could add to that, I would say some goats, some chickens. I actually would love to to have a chicken coop and some goats and have, fresh goat milk and bees.
I love that.
That's what I'm sort of, I always, it's so funny because I have all of these interests that sometimes feel like they're at polar opposites from each other. So I love the glam and the earrings and I love, dressing up and all that. And at the same time, I also want to mill my own flour and go and milk the goats. I want to do so I sort of feel like my feet are always in two different worlds. And then I want to be at the gym and I want to be doing weighted pull-ups. I want like a plate around my, around my waist, like pulling up like, however many I can. So it's funny. It's funny. I've actually been talking to my husband about how we're going to redesign the backyard. Yeah. And then, the next sort of step is like, can we get some bees? Can I get into apiary? Can I get into, harvesting, farming bees and getting the honey? And can we get some chickens? Like, yeah.
No, I love it. Again, there's a lot of connectivity here because, I'll just give it to you in my poetic way that I actually express myself, and really my whole brand is built. I am where edge meets curve. It's that line down the middle, right?
Yeah.
And so when you say that to me, I mean, my heart beats fast because I'm like, girl, I get you. It's like, I'm the same way. I lived in New York City. I also lived on the North Shore of Kauai. There's no streetlights there. And if you meet me in either or, you would never guess that, I lived in, if I'm on Kauai, you're not going to think like, oh, the girl in New York City and vice versa, right? Because I fit in so easily in both environments. So, I love that about you. And that makes perfect sense. And it segues into some areas of conversation that I'm really excited to have with you. But before we go there, I want to surface a quote that I really love of yours. I think it is so powerful, and I'd love for you to elaborate on this quote, that aging is a privilege.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about this a lot because in society, women it's the Barbie monologue, right? It's like, be healthy, but really be thin. Never get old. Like have money, never ask for money. It's all these different extremes. And even if you are thin, let's say, there's another 2 pounds that you can lose. There's another 5 pounds that you can lose. If you're muscular, there's another. So it's always like there's always another level. It's always another level, and it can feel sometimes for women that whatever the standard is constantly moving. And I think aging is a part of that construct. We often will disregard women once they reach a certain age. We see this in medicine, we see this in healthcare. And I'll say this with love. If a man were to walk into medical office complaining of ED, of erectile dysfunction, if a doctor were to say to them, you know what you need, honey, you need to find a new hobby. Like maybe you should try woodworking. Like if someone said that to a man, it would be completely unacceptable. And yet for women who are going through perimenopause and menopause, they're told, you know what, honey, maybe you need a new hobby. Maybe you should take up gardening, or maybe you should, take up, whatever, pottery, or whatever it is that they're telling them. Or here's an SSRI, or here's it's part of aging. Yeah. And so we're really given a lot of confusing signs about, confusing signals about aging. Mm-hmm. And one of the things to your, the quote that that you quoted me on, I think that aging is such a privilege. To get wrinkles is such a privilege. It's a privilege to have stretch marks. Like I have stretch marks from my pregnancy. They are my, my warrior bands, because I was able to carry my babies to term and birth them in the way, not exactly the way I wanted, but, mostly the way I wanted. I'm proud of what my body has created. And sometimes you think of, what's going on in the world. There's always a war somewhere, the Middle East, there's something going on there. There's the ongoing Ukrainian Russian conflict. There's the Palestinian and Israeli conflict. Mm-hmm. And those women and children, like some of them, they're not here anymore, right? Like there's atrocities that happen throughout the world, for political reason, for land, for whatever it is. And it's such a privilege. It's such a privilege to wake up every day. Yes. And it's such a privilege to become a grandmother. I can't remember what actress it was, but she was saying something. I just remember what she said, and I bristled at it. It was like, I don't allow my grandchildren to call me Nan. Like I don't allow them to call me grandmother, because it was maybe a reminder for her in some way that she was old. And it's like, yeah. And what comes with age? It's the wisdom. It's our lived experience. It's our ability to draw on and lean into our intuition, which we've had our whole life, by the way, but we completely ignore it when we're younger because we are trying to search and, achieve and succeed and acquire all the accolades. And we lean into that sort of masculine energy of hunting and acquiring, and there's nothing wrong with that. And we can not be the agents for our own bodies that we can and we should, and which is why we see women burning out and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think aging is a privilege. I'm excited. I have my children. I'm proud to be a mother, and I can't wait to be inducted into the grandmother club. Like I can't, if that happens for me, that would make me so happy. And so I think about how I want to show up as a grandmother. I say this, like, I want to be a kick-ass, 95-year-old. I want to be able to play with my grandkids, maybe even great grandkids. I want to be able to get off the floor and get down onto the floor with them and play with, whatever toys they're doing. I want to be able to lift them up, take them to the park, that kind of stuff. So I want to reframe aging a little bit insofar as first by default, it's a privilege to get to 50 or 60 or 70 or 80, because there are so many women who have not had that privilege for whatever their environmental or geographical location has dictated for them.
Very true. I'm 45. I'll be 46 in May, right? So I'm in the perimenopausal years, and I come from the time where, you don't talk about your age, right? You're supposed to quiet it. And, I know that my community really appreciates how I'm like, fuck that, for the exact reason that you're sharing. I'm like, first of all, every day is a gift. Every day I get to wake up and I'm living another day of my life. I'm not trying to deny that or, shush that. I appreciate that. So it really does speak to your epic quote and everything that you just shared. Second, I have this concept, we've grown up and heard age gracefully. And I'm like, fuck that. Keep the grace for, your character, your qualities. I want to age like a fucking badass. And then so when you're talking about
keep the grace for your character.
You know what I'm saying?
I love that. That's so great.
Well, yes. And so you talking about how you want to show up as a grandmother, you're like, I want to I want to be capable, basically.
Yeah.
And anybody who
Yeah.
doesn't follow you yet on Instagram, you need to go follow her, because your stories are like, I have no doubt that you make it that far and you are going to be that badass grandmother who is, you know, physically capable, who's cognitively still fucking there and potent. And, you know, so you're really, this is one thing that I really love about you, is that you walk it, you walk your talk. So you're not just preaching this, you know, narrative shift, but you're actually living proof of it. And I think that is, I mean, that's the best example, you know, the best way that we can teach anyone is to actually be the thing that we're talking about.
Yeah, thank you. That's received with love, of course, and I appreciate that. And I think, yeah, show your work. You know, if you're somebody who's talking about, you know, aging or perimenopause or whatever, show the hashtag show your work, right? What are you doing around that? So I like to show, you know, I'm a chiropractor, so neuromusculoskeletal function has kind of been my jam for, you know, the better part of, gosh, let's see. I got into college in 2003, but yeah. So where are we now? 24. So 21, like 21 years, right? So like brain metabolism, muscle and bone health, and how we can optimize all those. That's what I've spent my years in private practice doing, and now trying to inspire sort of women specifically more on a global scale.
Yeah. Well, and I really, you know, what you share, especially, you know, the conversations around, training, nutrition for your cycle, perimenopause. I mean, obviously me being in these years, I learn a lot from you. So I'd love to kind of talk about some of the fundamentals, maybe focusing right now just in the perimenopausal phase of women's lives. Can you first define what is perimenopause?
Yeah, sure. It's sort of it's a portal. I'll say it's a portal of energy and time that is the years preceding menopause. So menopause is a day in your life. It's the day that you qualify for the diagnosis of not having your period for 12 consecutive months. Peri just means around. So perimenopause is the time around menopause. So usually for most women, it's like 10 to 15 years prior. So starting around mid to late 30s for a lot of women, and then into our 40s, certainly we're definitely in sort of the throes of perimenopause. Now, there are some changes that happen in the body as we are moving towards not having our cycle anymore. Of course, the first most obvious one is the changes to our reproductive cycle. So we are lowering, you know, late 30s, we start seeing lowering. First, it's usually progesterone, which is the hormone, you know, pro-gestation. It's like the pro-pregnancy hormone. So if you become pregnant, your progesterone is very high. It's very high in the luteal phase of the cycle. It's the only time in the cycle where we see progesterone is in the second half. And so a lot of women will start noticing in the second half of their cycle, mid to late 30s, early 40s, certainly, where they may feel a little bit more anxious. Sleep is a little bit more disturbed. Maybe they're running a little bit hotter. Digestive system can slow down, bowels can slow down. Progesterone has all its hands in many different pots. And then the other bigger change, and we tend to see this later in perimenopause, so mid to late 40s, where both you and I are, I'm 46, is where we start to see changes in estradiol. So estradiol is the main. There are three types of estrogens. That's the main one. Estradiol can wildly vacillate. It can actually go up and down and around and left and right and, you know, sideways. But the overall trend is down. So the overall trend from 40 to 50, you know, and whenever you are menopausal, the overall trend is down. But in that sort of trend, in that time where it's trending downwards, it can be up and down. So a lot of women will complain of more exaggerated PMS symptoms. So, you know, again, very similar to the low progesterone, like the anxiety, the mood. What you'll often see is very tender breasts. Or very dense breasts. You might even have been told that you have fibrocystic breasts. You might see polyps or fibroids, let's say in the uterus. So, and then very heavy bleeding as well. That's the other big qualifier. So if you are someone who's running estrogen dominant, which is just to say higher estrogen relative to progesterone in the second half of your cycle, you can see very heavy bleeding when you do get your period. So lots of clots. You're having to change your pad like more, or your cup or whatever, more than you should. So more than every 4 hours or so, that would be considered a heavier flow, particularly in the first half, like when you first start bleeding. So that's some of the things that happen in perimenopause from a sex hormone perspective. The other thing, and I'm sure we'll get into this, is the metabolic changes as well, which is as a function of aging, we just naturally become more insulin resistant. So our tolerance to carbohydrates lowers, our blood glucose tends to start creeping up because the pancreas can't actually keep up. Like it's secreting more and more and more insulin, and it can't really keep up with driving the glucose into the cells. And of course, when you have a lot of insulin, systemic insulin, the body's like, what is going on? So,
Right.
we're just going to turn down the signal, right? So we're going to turn down how much insulin. It's sort of like a song on the radio that you've heard 100,000 times. You're like, oh God, this thing, you just like you just turn it down, right? That's kind of what the cells are doing. That's a visual of insulin resistance. And so interestingly, what we do see from the research is that insulin resistance starts in the skeletal tissue or the skeletal tissue. So it starts in the muscle.
Yep.
So I'm sure we'll talk about ways that we can overcome that, but it is very interesting because muscle has both insulin dependent and independent ways of taking glucose up. So the insulin dependent way is what becomes affected as we get older. So this is why we need to be doing things like resistance training, and perimenopausal women need to do a bit more zone 2 cardio, which I'm sure we'll talk about all that. But so there's some metabolic changes as well. And the last thing I'll also say is for women in their 40s in particular, I like to call this the stress sandwich. And I've spoken at lectures, and this is sort of how I explain it to the audience, is like we have typically mid 40s, we start to see our parents aging. So there's more responsibility maybe in taking care of them. We're making sure that they're going to their appointments, or they're getting the physical therapy that they need, or, the medication, et cetera. They start to, there's more of a stressor from above. And then from below, if you've had children, then, those children are now, depending on when you had your children, they're like in their teenage years, which is when they become super mouthy. And, and when the parenting, I like to say this is when the parenting actually starts, like up until about 13, they're super cute. Kind of, they do what you say. And then they turn 13 and they know more than you.
Right.
So I call that the stress sandwich, because you have sort of, this pressure from above with like aging parents and the responsibilities that entails. And then you have your kids are now going through their teenage years and that can be a stressor as well. So you sort of have these these sort of opposing forces, and you're in the middle. And of course, as we started the conversation off with, we're natural caregivers. So what do we want to do? We want to give to our parents. We want to give to our aunt who needs a drive to to get her eyes checked or whatever. And we want to also take our kids to soccer, or make sure that they're not, going to kill themselves because they think that they're infallible in some way. Right. So, there's a unique set of stressors for women in perimenopause, because we have these two sort of like these environmental stressors that can also run amok. It can drive up some of our, cortisol levels. It can drive up our sympathetic dominance, which is just a fancy way for saying like you're super duper stressed. And that can affect, of course, our metabolism. That can affect the way that we metabolize our foods. It can affect the way that we sleep. It can affect our mood. It can affect everything. So there's kind of those three things happening: sex hormones, metabolic hormones, and stress.
When I feel like it was around 40, so going on 6 years. In the last 6 years, I from 40 on, let me start there, is when I really started to position hormones, balancing my hormones, hormone health, as the top priority because of everything that you just shared, where, I started to get symptoms of, things that you mentioned, like my cycle, heavy periods. Also, hunger cues changed around certain, in different weeks of the month, my energy levels for training. Yeah. It really started to shift, right? And so this, I'm a geek about all things biology, physiology, neuroscience, all the shit. And so, I just start deep diving and learning about like what's going on. And then I do deep testing as well, which is really helpful. But what I want to ask you around this idea of hormones is we hear this a lot, like balance your hormones. But to me, it's a very kind of oversimplified statement.
Wishy-washy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not easy to, what does that even mean?
Like which hormones and to what amount and when?
Because a lot of the symptoms too can, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're estrogen dominant, sometimes the symptoms can also be similar to not getting enough estrogen or having enough estrogen.
Yeah. Low estrogen presents almost the same way as high estrogen does. So does testosterone actually. High and low T actually look very similar as well. Yeah.
Right. Because that's another thing that starts to happen, right? Women in this, and that's well, a lot of women aren't thinking about testosterone, but like we need that testosterone.
Well, and we should be thinking about testosterone. I know that, often estrogen or estradiol is like phenotypically ascribed as the female hormone, but we actually have more testosterone than we do estrogens. So it's when we start to see estrogen, and I didn't mention it, but testosterone also decreases, in perimenopause as well. And one of the things that we see, which is related to both declining estradiol and testosterone, is our confidence, our ability to make decisions, our levels of anxiety. Testosterone is, I remember having this, there was a patient I had many years ago, and she was, I call her she was like a boardroom Betty. Like she would go in and just own the boardroom. This is what we're going to do. She was an entrepreneur, 8-figure entrepreneur. And so she was, running this big branding agency, and she would just run, like kind of come in and run the meetings and no problem. And then one day she couldn't. No, she was like, should we, shouldn't we? And she's like, who am I? She felt like a shell of her former self. And then of course we run some testing, and lo and behold, her testosterone levels are very low. So I think that testosterone is related to confidence. I mean, it's certainly there's it's famous for libido. It's famous for muscle mass, which is, it is involved in those things very intricately. And when we look at subtle signs of perimenopause, subtle signs are are things like anxiety, not wanting to connect with people, wanting to stay in rather than go out, that kind of thing. Usually that's like I'm
laughing just because I think about myself, but I'm also introverted.
Oh, damn, that's me. So, but the thing, like, it's one thing to have JOMO, right? Like the joy of missing out. Like it's not like we want to be partying all the time and all of that. But if all of a sudden, you've made some plans, let's say, to go for, dinner with your girls. And then as the date approaches, you're like, oh, how can I get out of this? Or I don't feel like getting dressed up, or, oh, I don't want to put on the makeup, or, oh, like that kind of, catabolic thinking, I'll say.
Yeah.
It's a subtle sign for that is perimenopause. And, I find myself doing that too. I'm like, oh, people, do I have to people today? Okay. And then you just have to do it. Because you always feel better. Anytime I connect, so right now you and I are having this conversation, and I feel so happy that we're doing it.
Me
and
too.
It's so important. I think in perimenopause, menopause, I think it even becomes even more so, where we want to align ourselves with people that are our people, that get us, that have the same values and the core values and the principles and the adherence to, whatever value set that you've ascribed is important to you. It's important to surround yourself, because we know, we can talk about loneliness, but it's like loneliness is the new smoking, right?
Yeah.
It's like smoking is terrible for you. Don't ever do that. But also have a social circle. There's a reason why we see these centenarians, and I think that they were trying to say, oh, it's because of their diet and stuff. And I'm sure that the diet plays into it. But all of these centenarians and super centenarians, so people who are living past 100 or past 110 or 115, they are intricately involved in their communities. So this is something that I think when you look at the blue zones, like the Okinawans and the Sardinians and all of 100, 105, all of that, they are deeply connected with family, with friends, They go for walks every day. There's all of these things that they're doing. So I know I'm on a tangent here, so I'll
No,
stop.
it's a good one. Don't stop. I love it. You can, no,
we need to prioritize people, like people that are that we love. I always sort of categorize, and you can tell this by, if you've gone for dinner and you feel really drained, or you feel really energized, like who are the battery drainers, like who are the vampires, and who are the chargers, who are the people that charge you up. Like when you and I spent, we went for dinner when we were in Austin together. Like I was like on fire. I was like, how am I gonna sleep now? Like we had just our little adventures with Rachel and stuff, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And, I was so awake afterwards. So that's sort of like a tell as well. Like if you feel really happy and really, elated after you've connected with someone, or you're like, God, all she did was like gossip about her husband and like or whatever it is. Battery drainers or battery chargers. That's how I look at it.
Queen, this is your call to greatness. If you are ready, and I mean truly ready, to shift anything in your outer experience, your outer reality, your finances, your health, your relationship, anything career related, anything spiritual, any shift that you want to make that has to do with your reality has to first start with shifting who you are, your self-identity. My Future Self digital course is your supportive blueprint that helps you achieve this. The inner shapes the outer. So when you get crystal clear on your core beliefs, your core values, your core desires, your high heart goals, when you learn how to rewrite parts of your past that maybe don't feel so great and instead leverage those experiences to be fuel for you to expand and to grow, this is how you start to change the game behind the game of life, which all starts and ends with you. I've designed this course from my heart, soul, and experience to be a femininely fierce experience for you to uncover and connect with your most authentic self. And as a Future Self student, you get 3 months free membership access to Queendom. This is where we really get to connect. Queendom is such a rad, sacred, empowered space where every month you get a live Q&A call with me so we can connect and troubleshoot any area of your life that you would like, or just get some encouragement from me as well as the other queens in the community. This is a really sacred space, and I will see you in Queendom. This is so important. You really surface a lot of important and maybe not so common markers of what's actually taking place in these very sacred years of our life. I mean, the testosterone to confidence connection, that is not something that I hear about often at all. And that is so important. I know so many women listening or watching this just perked up like, oh shit, wait a second, that sounds like me right now. So it's really, it's so valuable to take all of this information in that you're sharing. Let's talk about some of the ways that we can harmonize our hormones, with these sort of like right here, right now tools that, we all essentially are, we all have accessibility to. Sunlight. I'll let you run the course of what are some of the ways that we can, just be keeping our vitality strong as we are navigating this, subtle or maybe jagged roller coaster of, our hormones through these years, perimenopausal years.
Great question. Okay, so there's lots of low cost ways to do it. And then there's also hormone replacement therapy. So let's just put HRT on the table as something that women can explore. Yep. Obviously you'd have to have a, conversation with your primary healthcare provider, but I will just say that HRT can be for some women just like turning on a light bulb. It can be life-saving for them. It can absolutely help with their experience. You and I know that you train in the way that I like to train. I'm actually looking forward the next time I get to see you. We're going to make sure that we work out together. Yeah, yes. We're going to train together. So you can do all of those things, and I'm going to outline some of those for you now. Mm-hmm. And for some women, And I would even include myself. Like I'm not there yet, but I am absolutely open to the idea that I might be doing all the, mastering in the, majoring in the majors, like doing all the things with diet and exercise and stress management. And I might also need some hormone replacement. HRT should be in your conversation if you are someone in your 40s with your healthcare provider, particularly if you were starting to feel like some of the symptoms and clinical signs and symptoms that we've been talking about. Yeah. And if your doctor says to you, "Oh, you just need a hobby," or "Oh, it's just a part of aging," or we don't need hormones. Get a new doctor. Okay, so I'm just gonna put that out there. That is absolutely irresponsible. Medicine. So with that being said, so we want to have hormones as an option for our women always if they choose to, right? Some of the free, we'll say, and low cost, I mean, you mentioned one of them, sunlight in the morning, certainly starting the circadian clock. I'm actually I know it sounds a bit like woo, but taping your mouth at night. Okay. If you are just nasal breathing overnight, that can actually positively influence your capacity to produce testosterone and estrogen.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
So because when you are breathing through your mouth, you become dehydrated. This is a stress response. And whenever whenever the body's like deciding, okay, like cortisol or sex hormones, it's going to choose the thing that's going to help with your survival, which is usually like that stress cascade, right? If you're stressed, if you're releasing some of the cortisol and the catecholamines that kind of go along with it, your body's always going to prioritize that. So even just the simple thing of like mouth tape, and you don't need, I mean, I know there's like hostage, I love hostage tape. I use hostage tape. I have no affiliation with them, but I really like the product. But you can just get some like Scotch tape that you have in the kitchen, just a little sort of postage stamp size on your mouth, just to keep your lips together so you're focusing on nasal breathing. So that's one way.
Is there, sorry, just a quick question about that. Is there any dangers around that you're aware of? Like any considerations to, like if you sleep alone at night, for example, like does somebody need to, I don't know, be thinking twice about mouth tape? I've always wondered that, and I've never been able to ask anybody.
Well, like the hostage tape is like literally it looks like you have duct tape on your face, right?
I've seen it on Instagram.
Maybe that's a little extreme for some people. Yeah. But there are I know that there are brands that almost have like it's almost like a T. So there's like a band, or maybe it's not a T, but it's like an H on its side. So you have like the band here, and then there's just like a little thing on the lip. So you can still breathe through the mouth if you need to.
Got it.
And then the same thing with the Scotch tape. You can if you just put like a little postage stamp in the middle of the lip, you can, if you need to like pop your mouth open, you can. And you can also just breathe through the side of your mouth if you need to. Cool. So I don't think that there's any risk with that. Okay. Not that I'm aware of anyway. Okay, cool. So I think that it's a pretty safe, low cost or low, barrier to entry way to help naturally wake up more refreshed. And of course, we know when we're sleeping better, we're getting deeper sleep. That's also going to be helping with our sex hormone production because all of our sex hormones are made overnight. So that's one thing. Nutrition, I think, is really important. And I also think that fitness is very important. So I don't think that there's any foods that are going to increase your estrogen or, that are going to increase your testosterone, but we certainly can keep them, when we are consuming, you can help with your estrogen metabolism by consuming green leafy vegetables. So I know that there's lots of people online that like to talk about, oh, the oxalates and they're stealing your thing, they're stealing your nutrients and what have you. And I think for the most part, first of all, I'll say oxalates are almost completely degraded by cooking. So if you are worried about, the oxalates in spinach, like just saute them and the problem is basically gone. Like 80 to 90% of oxalates are degraded with heat. And spinach is like the big one. Like, kale always gets a bad rap too, but if you make kale chips or whatever, if you're consuming them raw, like if you're having like a raw kale smoothie or something every day, I mean, there may be like, you may be impacting the thyroid. You may be like you are consuming a lot of oxalates there. So like steamed, sauteed veggies are always a good idea. And that's going to actually help with your estrogen metabolism. So our estrogen metabolism, the way that estrogen is metabolized, part of it is done through the liver. And so when you're consuming green leafy vegetables, especially for the PMS that you were talking about, like I had that too. So like super tender breasts, they were angry. Like they did not want a bra on them. They didn't want, it's very, very tender.
Water retention, the whole damn thing.
Yeah, all the things. So all, that can really be ameliorated quite well with consuming more green leafy veg or green powder, right? If you're not wanting to do the sauteing and all that kind of stuff, greens powder can help with that. But I do, whenever possible, like to have the whole food. That can help with estrogen balance because it'll help metabolize excess estrogens. And it's also really, so that's in the liver. And then the other piece is in the gut. So where estrogen is metabolized, partly in the liver, and then we also see it excreted in the gut. So there's an area in the gut called the estrobolome, which is just like the area in the gut that metabolizes estrogens. You want to be thinking about having lots of good probiotics. You want to be thinking about pre and probiotics, things like sauerkraut, kimchi, all of that stuff is going to really help with the balance in the estrobolome to help metabolize and get rid of estrogens. So that's a way that we can actually manipulate estrogen levels through the diet.
Yep.
And then in terms of fitness, one of the principles, I mean, we know that the more lean muscle mass we have, the more testosterone we require in order to maintain it. And then of course, when you are training, you are going to have a transient rise in testosterone post workout. So depending on how fit you are, that, the more fit, you're going to have a smaller rise. So that may last for, 5 or 10 hours. If you're someone who is new to training, that can last up to like 48 hours. Like you can have a rise of testosterone post-workout for like 2 days afterwards. So training, and I'll caveat this by saying training heavy. So you are lifting heavy weights. And heavy is going to mean a lot of different, like even you and I, heavy is going to mean different for you than it is for me. Heavy is executing the reps so that you have near perfect form. Some break in your form is okay, but near perfect form. And if you were to ask yourself, how many more of these could I do? It's probably going to be 1, 2, or maximally 3. Like you shouldn't be able to, like you want to approach failure, but not actually get there. I mean, it's not necessary. The literature suggests that in order to grow muscle, we don't need to go completely to muscle failure. We just need to approximate it. So that's how I want you to think about heavy. If you're somebody who's new to lifting weights, that might mean 5 pounds. That might mean 2 pounds, whatever it is. You've set yourself up for, let's say 10 repetitions in a set. The last 2 or 3 of those reps, like rep 7, 8, 9, and 10 should be very difficult. You should be struggling and you shouldn't be able to do more than, if I was right beside you yelling in your ear as I would be, you shouldn't be able to do more than like two or 3 of them. Right. So that's how I like to think about training heavy. And that's how you're going to essentially rip apart the muscle, because that's what's happening. And you are forcing your body to grow, like you're forcing your body to actually recycle those myocytes, those muscle fibers that are less efficient, and grow new, stronger tissue. So that's a natural way that you can increase your testosterone. So those are like some, and a lot of women are like, oh, I still hear this and I will talk about this until I die, but you will not get bulky. I don't know if you find, do you come across this? Like where women are like,
I love that you just brought us here. 'Cause if you didn't, I was going there.
Okay.
Well, first let's put this out there. We grew up at the same time, different places of the world. But when I grew up, no, it wasn't about women being strong. Hearing putting on muscle has always lived in the space of men, not women. Even to this day, I do believe that when women hear, even though we've gotten so much further, in shifting this idea and the narrative, but there are still women who, when you say you want to build muscle, those words just don't feel good to the woman, because immediately you have this image of the big guy in the gym packing on muscle. And what I learned, and this is important to share, that, I grew up, I'm a mesomorph. I have 3 brothers. I have a sister. Grew up very athletic. I have shoulders. I've had shoulders my whole life, fortunately. I was doing fucking pull-ups when I was a kid, right? My dad had me bench pressing when I was 7 years old, right? I hated when I heard, and I always fucking did, oh, you're ripped. Oh, you're buff. Oh, I hated it, honestly. And I was
because Kate Moss, it was like, all love to Kate Moss, but she was the supermodel at the time. It was like this androgynous waif, very skinny, no hips. I was it was like, oh, here comes the caboose, right? Because you've seen me, like I got curves, like I got a butt,
You're gorgeous. So, Look at your shoulders.
Well, now, I mean, now, right? We have like Kim Kardashian to really thank for that. And like the whole, like, I don't know if it's like, is it butt positivity? I don't know what it is, but like,
sure,
like the glutes, like the glutes, right?
Right.
It's like, everyone, like the glutes are like the big focus now.
Yeah.
But when I was younger, I hated my body. I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to look. My thighs are always going to touch. It was always like the thigh gap. I was like, I'm never going to have that. I'm not built that way. I am built for making babies. Like, I have hips, And so now, of course, that's in vogue. But again, this beauty, like these standards of beauty, there's always a moving target. Like when we were growing up, it was like the Kate Mosses of the world. And I even remember in the 2000s, I've seen a couple posts on Instagram like this. It's like, how did we get through the 2000s where, we would say, oh, Beyonce, she's such a big girl. Like she's such a curvy, voluptuous girl. And it's like, she's not, she is curvy and she's beautiful, but she's definitely not big, and it was like the Jessica Simpson, and I'm totally aging myself here, but like the Jessica Simpson age, like her weight gain is like, look at, this is like the most disgusting a human could ever look like. And she was gorgeous. She was full, curvy, beautiful.
Yeah. No, well, we've gone through so much, women, like, and I know we're both so compassionate to this, the narrative and even for women who are afraid to get, quote, bulky, but I believe where you were going with this, and I stand by you with this, is first of all, it's bullshit. It's actually very difficult.
Like to try.
Right. And I'm the woman who can look at a weight and can put on muscle easier than majority of the women. It's still fucking hard for me. Yeah. Why is it hard for us?
We just don't have the testosterone. I mean, I just finished telling you we have way more, like about 10 times more testosterone than we do estrogen. But compared to men, they have like 20x, 10 to 20x times more testosterone than we do. So it's like, I heard, I want to say Lane Norton said this. So I think it's Lane who said this. He said something like, women being scared of getting bulky is like the equivalent, lifting weights and getting bulky is the equivalent of driving a car and thinking you're going to be a NASCAR driver.
Seriously.
It's so true.
Seriously.
And I'll just say there are outliers for sure. For sure, there's going to be like, people on the outskirts that totally are more androgenic, that can absolutely maybe put on more muscle. But for 98% of us, of which most of your listeners are going to fall in, it's just not, you're not going to get bulky. You're just not.
And, so when I was 16, I blew out my knee. I've had 3 knee surgeries for Taekwondo. I gained weight. I was on the American diet. I never had to think about diet or anything, right? I was just naturally, again, the mesomorph. I was a runner, sprinter. And then I wasn't anymore. You know what I mean? Like my body comp changed, late teens, and I gained all this weight. My brothers would tell me all the time, lift weights, eat protein. And I was, I didn't listen.
Like, that's for guys.
Yeah. I was like, I already have muscle. I don't want to get bigger. Yeah. Well, so what ends up happening when I finally learned the science and then started to listen to my brothers, the exact opposite happened. I got fucked. My whole body comp just essentially went to homeostasis, right? Where lean body fat, strong, healthy muscle tissue. I mean, it took me in the direction that I ultimately always wanted to go in, but just never believed was possible by doing those fundamental things called, lift heavy fucking shit and eat, high quality protein.
Yeah, eat high quality protein. I know.
Yeah.
And we ascribe it, it's like meat, fire, barbecue, man, it's like lift weights, man, it's like these are also really good for women. Having
Yes.
quality protein, you just meant, and I'll throw my hat in here for
Yeah.
like animal
Please.
proteins. I think that, quality protein is also very important, where we're sourcing the protein from. So you can even look at the difference between, and I had, we know Gabrielle,
Yeah.
good friend of yours, good friend of mine. I had Don Layman on my show, and he was talking about the difference between plant proteins and their bioavailability and animal proteins and their bioavailability. And when you have, even if you have whey powder, so people are like, oh, whey powder is not a food. It's a food because it's like 98% available to the body. So your body can make, when you give your body a scoop of, let's say, 25 grams of protein with whey, high leucine content, which maybe we'll get into today, maybe not, but that's going to drive muscle protein synthesis.
Yeah.
You are going to absorb like 96 to 98% of that. And if you compare that to, let's say, a rice protein or a pea protein, you're looking at somewhere between like 40 and 60% bioavailability. So you might be thinking that you're taking 20 or 25 grams of your pea protein, but your body's only able to make use of 40 to 60% of that. So in order for you to be driving, we were talking about lifting heavy as a way to, increase our testosterone, increase our muscle tissue. The other way to do that's in the kitchen, right? It's like the chemical stimulus of having protein. So you could be consuming, let's say, a plant protein that is only 40% available, and you're not going to put on muscle with that. You got to take in more, right? You got to think you have to increase your calories in order to sort of equate a plant protein with an animal protein. So that's not to say that you can't get there with plant proteins. You certainly can, but you're probably going to have to consume a lot of powders, right? Like the tofu, the tempeh, the tofurkeys, the whatever, that stuff's not really going to do. You have to consume more protein, plant protein powders. And you're probably going to have to take in more calories, which is also something to consider if you're a woman who's, let's say, a vegetarian and you're looking to reduce some of your adiposity or looking to lose some of your fat mass. You're going to need to increase your caloric intake, which is, of course, going to be more difficult for you to lose the fat if you're always taking in more calories. So.
It's such a great point. I didn't eat meat for, I think, 16 years. And I've talked about this before. I ate fish, and then I did my first comprehensive blood lab and found out through my ferritin testing that I was anemic.
What was your B? Did you know your B vitamins or your ferritin? Yeah,
I don't remember my B vitamins, but I remember because when Gabrielle first came on my show, which was years and years ago, I told her this. She's like, "Oh, you're an overachiever." It was either I fucking love her. My ferritin levels were 13. And for her, like her range where she likes her woman, she's also my doctor, one of my best friends and doctor, it's between 80 to 100. So when we talk about hair, we've talked about hair before.
I'm like messaging you. I'm like, tell me about your hair. Tell me exactly what you're doing for your hair because I would like to copy it. So tell me everything.
I went through a period where fucking hair is falling out. Like it's the worst feeling ever. Yeah. You're in the shower and you're just like, what is happening here? So it's okay. It's possible to do it outside of animal protein, but everything you shared is so important. You have to consider you don't get that same amino acid profile that you need without increasing your calories to not only increase muscle mass, but to keep your muscle tissue healthy, which in specific, in the perimenopausal years, right, we start to it becomes harder to put muscle on and to even keep our muscle on, right?
Totally.
It becomes more important.
You need both a mechanical stimulus, which is the lifting heavy weights that we've been talking about, and you need a chemical stimulus. So we actually, you can actually make your muscles, your 40-year-old or your 50-year-old muscles behave like they're 20 by increasing your protein intake, right? To overcome, like the muscles become, it's called anabolically resistant, which means they become resistant to growing as we're losing some of those sex hormones. We're becoming more insulin resistant, but you can overcome that by increasing your protein.
Yeah.
So women in their 40s and 50s, and I'll just say at the very minimum, I see a lot of people online now saying like 30 grams of protein per meal. I'm like, minimum 30 grams, but at least 1 gram of protein per ideal pound of body weight minimum. And then if you're 40 or you're 50 and you haven't been lifting weights for a long time, that number's gonna go up. It's gonna scale up, based on your lifestyle, based on how often you're lifting, and based on what your response to your food is. And that's a bit bio individual, so I can't give like exact. If you're 45, you need this, but there's many days where I'm taking in like just me personally, I'm taking in like 150 to 100 and sometimes 70 grams of protein a day.
Same.
Yeah. And it's just, I feel really good with that. I also make sure that I'm balancing my methionine and glycine by having collagen, making sure you're having lots of collagen in there as well, because high protein diets, we do need to think about glycine, because glycine can get sort of gobbled up if you're having too much protein. So the collagen supplementation is also awesome to do that as well.
I love that. I love my glycine. I love my collagen every day.
For skin, hair, and nails, like for hair, right? Collagen's super, super important, right? If you want to, and we all want to put our best, face forward. So the skin, the hair, the nails, that's important. And then, but also for your joints and your tendons, right? So think about when you're lifting weights, the muscles are working, but the muscles attach to tendons, which are attaching to your bones, right? Which is, and most muscles, all muscles, I don't think there is any that don't cross a joint. So we also have to be thinking about protein from driving the skeletal, like the skeletal tissue, the skeletal tissue.
Yep.
And we also want to be thinking about the collagen and the glycine from the tendon and bursa and joint perspective as well.
Amazing. No, it's so valuable. I love it. You earlier brought up the testosterone and the confidence connection. I want to get into the territory of psychology now. The women that I mentor, all my work is centered in self-mastery. So think self-awareness, self-confidence, self-love, self-trust. Vitality is always a part of the conversation with me. Why? It's foundational. You're never going to be your most confident self. You won't be able to trust yourself at the highest, capacity. Your intuition. I mean, it's just like the volume's down. And this is just my opinion and also my experience with low levels of vitality. Right. I'd love to know, first of all, what is self-love to you, and how does it show up in your life?
I think for me, self-love is making sure that I am doing what I'm going to say that I'm going to do for myself, keeping appointments that I've made, not skipping out on things. You mentioned self-trust. I think that one of the easiest ways that we can develop self-trust is by setting out a goal, whatever that goal is. Maybe you have a goal to lose weight or whatever it is, and then breaking that down into the behaviors that are going to lead to that outcome. So you have the behavioral goals, which are going to the gym 3 times a week, getting early morning sunlight, mouth taping, all the things that we've been talking about. And then the outcome goal is like, maybe it's the weight loss, or maybe it's it's the vitality, maybe it's the improved hormonal, levels. And part of the way that you increase your self-trust is by sticking to the behavioral goals and not just focusing on the outcome. So you might say, I want to lose 10 pounds. That's the outcome. The stuff that you want to be thinking about is the behaviors that lead to the outcome. So I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week, and you effing keep your promise to yourself. Like, you get your ass to the gym, come hell or high water, 3 times a week. And that's actually how you develop self-trust. And that's how you develop confidence. Confidence is a muscle like anything else. You have to work it. You have to, your ability to be proud of the work that you've done in the gym also bleeds into all of the other verticals in your life, the way that you show up as a parent, the way that you show up as a wife, the way that you show up as a friend, just the face that you put forward. So your ability to do hard things voluntarily, getting in cold water, going to the gym when you don't feel like it, going to bed on time, not doom scrolling on Instagram and at 9 in the evening when you should be in bed, or doing your oils in the evening or what have you. I think that is one of the best ways, at least I have found personally, to develop my own self-love and my own confidence, because I can look back and say, yeah, you did. Like, yeah, you did those eccentric freaking. I was doing this thing the other day and I was like, man, these are a slice of humble pie. They
I
were
saw them and they just made me tired.
Oh my God. They were deficit Bulgarian or split lunges or whatever.
Like that.
And they were so hard. And my body was like, please stop doing this. This is not fun. But I kept doing it anyway. I mean, I only did 6 per,
Only, but those are, come on. Yeah.
break. But I was so proud of myself afterwards. I was like, man, that was really hard. And I stuck with it. I did the set that I wanted to do. I did the reps I wanted to do. I was happy with my form. Yeah, that's how you build confidence, is by doing voluntarily, making yourself uncomfortable so that your comfort zone now begins to expand.
Would you say professionally that you've seen women's confidence, their worthiness, so self-esteem, self-trust, would you see a shift in women who had more vitality, were healthier, versus those who perhaps had a lifestyle that was less conducive to vitality?
Yeah, I think that when you are, you want things, it's like saying that you want the thing is not doing the thing, right? Doing the thing is doing the thing, right? So going to the gym is the thing that or in this case, the thing that's going to bring about the outcome that you're looking for. So I would say generally women who are, because there's a lot of, fail in the gym. One of the things I love about training, is it's changed my relationship to failure, because failure in the gym is a good thing. Like, that's kind of where you're working towards, right? And in life, failure is like this big F word. We don't want to fail. We don't want to look stupid. We don't want to be a beginner. And I think that when you are able to change your relationship to failure, you're able to be humble enough to be a beginner, to try new exercises or to try new things. I think that it forges maybe it's a philosophical premise about life, insofar as it's okay that I'm here and I'm not it's okay that I can see the gap, but at least I'm on the path. At least I've tried to do this. Maybe I look stupid in the gym, or maybe I can't do as many reps or the weight that I want to do, but I'm on the path. And most of us are on the same path. Some of us are a little further along than others. And that's why podcasts like this are so important, because we can share wisdom for people who are maybe a little further behind us on the path, and like lift them all up, bring them all along with us on the journey. But back to your original question, I would say, yes, people who are working out and changing their relationship to failure are people who tend to be more successful in whatever goals that they've set out for themselves, because they become more comfortable with the idea that successful people actually fail more. It's not that, successful people win more. It's that they actually fail more. The more that you fail, the higher likelihood that you are going to succeed. And so when we are changing the narrative around failure, I mean, that's one of the things that I think the gym does beautifully, is it's like, we want to get to failure, or as close to failure as we can get, like within 1 or 2 reps.
You're going for that.
Yeah, you're going for it, right? You're going for it. You're going all out. You're leaving it all on the gym floor. And I think that translates to other areas of your life. And you've certainly seen that in your life. I've certainly noticed, of course, I got into, the gym for aesthetic reasons, but my biggest derivative of working out regularly is the impact that it's had on how I feel about myself and how I show up in other areas of my life.
Oh yeah. The skill transfer is just potent on so many levels. So all of that is hardcore and of value, and lives in this very sort of high performance mentality and really a way of life, which makes me now want to ask you, as we start to round out here, women, I want to demystify with you, because I know that you can do this. I speak to this a lot, but I love your whole presence and ultimately your embodiment of this idea that being a strong woman means that you also can't be soft, means that your feminine energy kind of just has to be quiet and almost non-existent. Essentially, you ignore it, right? You certainly don't have a connection to it. But I firmly disagree in that. And I know that you live Yes. Go for it, girl. Give it to us, Stephanie.
Yeah, I honestly, like, you can be both. You can be strong and soft. You can be smart and silly. You can be a mother and sexy. You can be masculine and feminine. You can want to wear heels and milk goats.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the headline of this podcast.
That's the headline. Yeah. That's the title. It's
the title. Yeah.
Heels and milking goats. Yeah. How are they related with Dr. Stephanie? Yeah. I think that there's, I'll say it this way. There can be two truths that exist at the same time, and they can be oppositional truths, right? I think that in the algorithm and social media, it's like one or the other. You're blue or you're red. You're pro or you're anti. You're this or you're that, right? You're whatever.
Yep.
And there's a lot of othering. It's like you're with us or you're against us. There's also this crazy place in the middle, this like shades of gray, where you can be a little bit blue and a little bit red. You can be a little bit pro and a little bit anti. There can be you can take some of the truths that resonate with you and sort of have a more nuanced approach in the middle. And I think that this is what what I think you're trying to get at is that you can be strong, like you can be a beast in the gym, and then you can be a beauty. It's like, if you want to be a beast, you can also be a beast and a beauty. It's like not just, beauty or the beast, it's beauty and the beast, right?
Yes.
You can do both of those things. And so I think that if we can maybe lean into embracing different shades of gray rather than black and white, again, the skill transfer in life, in empathy for our, other humans. I mean, we're all just doing this thing called life for the first time. Like we're all first time, we're all just doing this for the first time. Okay.
Such a great point. So good.
We're all just kind of in this together. We're far more alike than we are different. And I think that if we can begin to embrace the duality, or that there can be that you can live on the entire spectrum. You can be strong and sexy, masculine and feminine, heels and milking goats, like all of the things. You can do all. You can be all of those things. I struggled in transparency. I struggled for years because I'm like privately kind of silly. Like I make all these little silly humor. Jokes, right? But I'm sharing more of that now. But in the beginning, I was like, no, strong like bull. Like I'm just gonna be the doctor, plain poker face, blah blah blah, because that's what they teach us in school. It's like never, if the patient is upset, like never show, it's like always like boundaries and all that. But that's not who I am. No. I'm not like that. So there's some things I know really well from my field of study, and I love to geek out on that stuff. And I'm also really silly. And I'm also, I also think that there's ways to be playful, so.
And I'd love that because playful energy is actually a principle in feminine energy. And it's so important. You're open. I love your humor. I love that you can laugh at yourself. I do it all the time, girl. And and I'm a huge advocate for playful energy for that reason. It's like, let yourself out, let go, so again, everything that you share, I value it, especially because you be it. You are it. I see it. I feel it. It's why we connect in real life, not just in podcast space. And I think your embodiment of this is so important because I know that so many women are just so hungry to feel this harmony. And I'll just throw this in to say, I know in my own life, because for whatever reason, that harmony has always been there for me. And I found that my masculine energy, we all have masculine and feminine energy. Gender it has nothing to do with that, right? Men and women, both masculine, feminine energy. My masculine energy is what keeps my inner structure so fierce that it allows me to feel safe. So safety, my feminine energy gets to come out and just unapologetically express herself because I have so much inner security that stems from the masculine energy that is very whole and fortified within me. So I actually, in my writing, my poetic way of expressing this is that they are lovers. They're not competitors. Right. They rely on each other. And the more that their relationship is intact, the better each of these energies, skills and attributes and the way that they support us in life, you're better able to utilize and express your masculine and your feminine energies in ways that support you to thrive in your life. So again, we're going to have to do another podcast literally on this subject because we didn't even like scratch it with you. And so we got to do part 2 and we'll tap into that and go more into, maybe you'll have your goats by then.
Maybe we'll do the podcast at the farm.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you so much for carving out your time. And honestly, for everything that you do and you share. Your podcast legit is one of my favorites. It's been for years. You are an incredible podcast host. And that's not I like you, I'm being nice. Like, I pay very close attention as a podcast host to other podcast hosts, and so your ability to listen is so phenomenal. You ask incredible questions. Your guest interviews are fucking awesome, as well as your solo episodes. So if, you want to shout out your podcast, I highly recommend everybody right now go fucking subscribe to her podcast and let them know wherever else they can find you and get more tapped into you and your wisdom and your beautiful fucking energy, Stephanie.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. So the podcast is my baby. It's called Better with Dr. Stephanie. So that's my philosophy for life. It's not about being the best. It's just being better. So we have thought leaders. We talk about all the principles of, what a well-lived life means. So anywhere you're listening to this, you can find Better. And, that's a free resource. I'm also on Instagram, as you mentioned. So just Dr. first name, last name, Dr. Stephanie Estima. If you want to check out our newsletter, we actually just relaunched it. It's called the Mini Pause. That's my little fun word on menopause. So all, actionable items for women who are 40 plus. So last week we did, let's see, what did we do last week? We did zone 2 training for perimenopausal women. What's coming up this week is injury prevention, like how we can actually, because a lot of the other thing actually I didn't mention is a lot of women who are getting into lifting weights are very scared of the heavy weights because they're like, I don't want to get injured. Yep. So we're talking about that in the mini pause in an upcoming issue. So you can just go to drstephanieestima.com and then you can sign up there. So those are some of the ways that you can interact with me.
Amazing. All in the show notes. Thank you so much. And I can't wait for the goats in part 2 with you, girl.
Me too. Can't wait.
Thanks so much for listening, you guys. Please like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star rating and review.